Everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. This is our weekly lecture series. This lecture is actually similar to our last lecture, which is unusual. Typically, people say things like, I want to look at Mikhail Tal's brilliant games. I want to look at Morphy's best games. I want to see Kasparov's best attacking games. Or something like, I want to see the Sicilian Dragon opposite side castling. And then I make a lecture. The last two lectures have been very difficult to prepare, so I'm afraid I do a bad job. But the last lecture, Improve Your Practical Play, which I did last week, that got a lot of views. So people like that kind of thing. This one's probably going to get more views. This lecture is titled Improve Your Chess. And I want to thank our sponsor, Marshall Blanchard. Thank you for sponsoring. And Marshall put a lot of ideas, like my last lecture, in what he wanted me to discuss. And he had very high expectations, which I won't meet, because basically those expectations can't be met in a 45-minute lecture. His expectations are something you get from a lifelong chess career, going through different ratings, reading a lot of chess books, doing chessable courses, playing chess online, playing chess in tournaments. There's no substitute for experience. So the number one thing you can do to improve your chess is play chess. And his focus was on intermediate players. I don't know what that means. I'll say 1,000 to 1,700, somewhere in there. And he wanted to know if there was a list or secrets to becoming 2,000 or better. And the answer is no, but he's the sponsor, so I'm going to do my damnedest to answer his questions the best I can. This is one of the few lectures that I think if he sponsored with 100 different grandmasters, he would get 100 different lectures about what's important in chess. So to improve your chess, I'm going to try to concentrate on what's important. The first board we're going to look at, I have opening trap that I want to show you. And then I'm going to show you a lot of other things that are sort of in my mind, but I didn't put them on the board yet. And then after that, I'm going to supplement that with, if I have time, 4 different games that I've played in my chess career that I think exemplifies what you need to do to improve your chess. Okay, and the sponsor was interested in a list of things like 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D. And I'm going to do the best I can to live up to the sponsor's wishes. But I think more importantly, I want to help you improve your chess. So some of the things I do, maybe the sponsor won't like. Some of the things I do, sponsor will like. My goal is that everybody watching improves their chess. That's the point of the lecture. Okay, so the number one mistake that intermediate players make, is they don't spend enough time, occasionally they don't spend any time, looking at what their opponent is doing. Conversely, some super grandmasters spend too much time looking at what their opponent's doing, because very few people spend enough time doing that. And if you never do that, then you're never going to get to the vaulted 2,000, 2,200 that we all dream of. I know I did when I was a kid. And one thing I have over current players is I was very low rated and I gained rating points throughout my youth. And I stopped when I was in my mid 20s. And then in my late 40s, early 50s, I went the other way. So I'm not improving. So this lecture isn't for me. I'm much worse than I used to be, but I can tell you things that I did in my career that improved my chess. And when these things actually changed. When I was a kid, between ages 6 and 10, the way I improved my chess the most was playing chess. I played a lot of chess tournaments. A lot of people are afraid to play in chess tournaments because they're concerned about their rating or they don't think they're ready. That's a bad attitude. To get better at chess, you need to play chess. Okay, imagine two beginners who were exactly the same strength. And one of them goes to a chess tournament every weekend, and the other one goes every 2 months. In a year, I know which one's going to be better. Not the guy who played in 6 tournaments, the guy who played in 50 tournaments. He's going to be better at chess because he has more experience. Now, the way to improve your game is when you play chess, you want to recognize patterns that happened in previous games and apply them to your current game. That's not easy to do, but it becomes easier when you play a lot of chess. The first year or two, it's hard to remember anything because chess is so difficult. And if I could do a 45-minute lecture and make everybody 500 points better, then chess wouldn't be the great game that it is. Chess takes a lifelong commitment to getting better, and super grandmasters in their teens and 20s and 30s are always trying to get better. They have coaches, they study chess all day, they study their own games, which is the second thing I wanted to get to, is you need to study your own games with a coach if possible, with engines, with your opponent, and by yourself. When I worked with Gregory Kaidanov in the early 1990s, when I had the Sanford Fellowship, he told me he analyzes all of his games 5 times. I had never heard of such a thing. But he's trying to get the objective truth so that he can play better the next time. The reason you play chess when you watch a lecture like this one called Improve Your Chess is to improve your chess. And a lot of people have sort of the wrong idea. They want to win. And if they win, they're like, yay, I won. And if they lose, they tear up their score sheet. Rawr, I've never been so bad. Okay, that's not what you do in chess. That's what you do if you want to just be happy or sad after each individual game. That doesn't make you a better player. That may make you a better competitor. Maybe you like to compete and you're not trying to get better. You're just trying to win games and be sad when you lose games and mad and rip up those score sheets. But this is an Improve Your Chess lecture. So what you need to do to improve your chess, always try to figure out what your opponent's move does. Spend more time with that. Also, want to see what changes happen in the position. And I'll make a move finally, confusing the audience, e4. A lot of beginner and intermediate players, when they see the move e4, they stare at the e4 pawn. Now, maybe I'm doing that, and maybe this lecture won't be very good, because I had cataract surgery yesterday on my right eye. So maybe on the left side of the board, from my point of view, I'll see lots of tactics. And on the right side, I'll just be blind. Although I had the surgery about 36 hours ago. And I think I see better out of my right eye now than my left eye. Everything's more bright and colorful, but my eye has to get used to it. My brain does, because it's a completely different way of looking at things when they did the cataract surgery. Okay. So what I wanted to say was, you can stare at the e4 pawn, but probably equally or more important is, what are you doing to your position when you make a chess move? And what you're doing is you're affecting other pieces. And this position, you've affected your knight, bishop, king, and queen. Your queen can go to 4 squares that it previously couldn't go to. Your bishop can go to 5 squares it previously couldn't go to. The knight can go to 1 square it couldn't go to. And the king can go to 1 square. And I would argue the king is more exposed now that white's played e4. And I could prove it by showing you a very quick checkmate. Okay, got to play the Scandi so that, some people are happy. And after king e2, black can play queen e4 mate. King e2 is a ridiculous move. And the reason king e2 gets mated is white's e-pawn is gone. That opens up his king, and king e2 accentuates the opening of the king, and that actually leads to mate on move 3. Frankly, terrible. Okay, this actually happened in 1800s because they're used to, this isn't a joke. Most of my things I say are jokes, but some things I say aren't jokes. In 1800s and before, if you made an illegal move, you were required to move your king, which is a really dumb rule. And they changed that rule, over 150 years ago. So you guys don't know about it. And there was a game played where white wanted to play knight c3, attacking the queen, and white accidentally picked up his bishop and put it on c3. It was an accident. He meant to play knight c3. And the rule at the time was that move is illegal, so you have to move your king. And then he got checkmated. Knowing the rules is actually very important in chess. Okay, and let me show you what I mean about knowing the rules and why it's important. Okay, in this position, white plays, let's see, a3. Okay, black plays queen a5, white plays b4. These moves are all terrible. Okay, now, if you were playing in a chess tournament, not online, if you're playing online, none of this applies. If you're playing in an over-the-board tournament and you're like, oh boy, and you pick up this pawn, take it off the board and replace it with your bishop, because you notice the a pawn is pinned, and so you win a pawn. Then your opponent says that move is illegal, your pawn's on e7. You can't play bishop takes b4. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry. And you're like, well, the touch move rule, I have to move my bishop, but I can't move my bishop, so I move my queen. Then the arbiter says, excuse me, you touched the pawn on b4. Touch move. If you touch your opponent's piece and you can legally capture it, then you have to. So instead of playing queen e5 check, winning the rook, you actually are required to play queen takes b4. Frankly, terrible. Because that's the rules of chess, the touch move rule. If you break the rules of chess, sometimes there's consequences that you don't see. Okay, now position I wanted to show you was one from the Kebrdle Khan. And this part of the lecture will focus on, I don't want to make a blanket statement because it could be wrong, but I'm the grandmaster, so I can make blanket statements. What do you guys know? On the 4th and 5th rank, for both players, often there are minor pieces there, and often those minor pieces aren't defended. And it happens probably in like 85% of games. Conversely, when we talk about the 3rd rank and you play moves like bishop d3, bishop e3, knight c3, knight f3, typically those pieces are protected by the pawns or the queen or another minor piece. So you don't have to worry so much. Okay, in the Kebrdle Khan, this is the main line. And this position, black has 3 moves that grandmasters play. Bishop f5, knight d7, and knight f6. And when I play 1-minute chess, bullet chess on the internet, I like to pretend that I blundered a piece for psychological reasons. My opponent thinks they won a piece. So sometimes in 1-minute chess, in this position, where every grandmaster who ever lived 100% of the time has played bishop g6. If you have a database, you're going to see a lot of bishop g6. Close to 100%. In 1-minute chess, I like to play knight f6. And then sometimes my opponent's pre-moving, playing knight f3, then I play bishop g4. Now they take a couple of seconds and they think I blundered a piece, but they pre-moved and they're like mad. Okay. And then sometimes my opponent takes a couple of seconds and takes my bishop and they think they won a bishop. And as I said at the start, when pieces are on the 4th and 5th rank and they're not protected, sometimes you win them. Now, knight takes bishop is the correct move. Then I play queen a5 check, and my opponent is confused for a couple of seconds because they thought they won a piece, and now they realize they can't save their knight. It's not good for black, but I usually gain about 5 seconds, and I gain the psychological advantage of my opponent thinking, yay, I won a piece against a grandmaster on move 4 or 5. Then they're like, oh, never mind. So they stop check somehow, and I take my knight back, and the game goes on. But I have the time advantage, and I have the psychological advantage. Anyway, the point is, I know this tactical trick, queen a5 check, not from this position. I know it from my chess career. That's why you have to play a lot of chess. The same tactics happen over and over again, and you keep missing them. You have to take tactics that happen in one position and apply them to the current position that you have. And that's what we're going to do in this first board. We're going to look at a lot of those kind of tactics that you're going to see over and over again. And then when you get them in your game, you have to remember the idea because you've seen it so many times. And basically in chess, the goal is to overlearn. For example, you have mate in 3, and nobody tells you because you're playing a tournament game. You think for 3 minutes, and all of a sudden it hits you, I have mate in 3, and then you win. Then you're really proud of yourself. If it was a puzzle and it said mate in 3, you would solve it quicker because somebody told you, hey, there's mate in 3, and you wouldn't be so proud of yourself, but you still would be. If Magnus Carlsen had the same position as you in a tournament game, he would see the mate in 3 in 2 seconds, what you saw in 3 minutes. And it's actually important that things that are complicated to you become simpler. Okay, so like if I do 8 plus 8, I'm going to get the right answer. But if my stepson does some calculus problem, I have no idea what's going on, and he's going to get the right answer, and he'll say, that was easy, that's like 8 plus 8. So you have to be really good at things that lesser rated players find really difficult, even if they can solve them. Okay, in the game I want to show you, before we look at other traps, black plays knight f6, attacking the knight. Trade knights. Black can take either way. Take with e-pawn. And the most common move 40, 50, 60 years ago was bishop c4. That is not the most common move now. Okay, and black should play queen e7 check. Now in this position, most people go la 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 la. They're not super focused. Okay, the game just started, nothing's happening. They're not looking 20 moves ahead yet. And so in this position, white has at least 6 moves that get out of check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7. Okay, I didn't see bishop e6. So 7 moves get out of check. The 2 relatively obvious ones lose immediately. Okay, most books say you should play queen e2. Most engines say you should play bishop e2, which nobody would play because let's play bishop c4. Okay, but a lot of intermediate players in the rating range that I discussed earlier would play something like knight e2 or bishop e3 and develop a piece. Let's look at knight e2. Knight e2 is double question mark and loses. Now, if somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, you're winning here, then you're going to find the win, which I've already done. I told you it loses. So you'll be like, I saw the winning move instantly. Well, that's because I told you there's a winning move. If you're playing in a tournament game, you might be like, okay, now it's my move. I'll develop a piece. In this position, white did something I talked about earlier, which means he has loose piece on the 4th or 5th rank. Obviously, frankly, it's his bishop. And one of the things you can't miss if you want to improve your chess is your opponent checking you. And no matter how many times I tell my students that, and no matter what their rating is, sometimes 1800, they blunder, their opponent plays check, and they say, oh, I didn't see that. Okay, you have to see that check in your dreams a week before your game. You can't be missing checks when they happen. It has to be second nature to you that your opponent might check you. And so queen b4 check wins the bishop on c4. And if you want to get to 2000, 2200, you can't do that. And if you say, I missed queen b4 check, give me a break. You can't miss queen b4 check. If your opponent plays a6 and that wins the game, you can miss that because nobody would think a6 wins the game. If your opponent checks you and attacks a loose piece and you say, I didn't see that, you're not getting to 2000. That's something you have to see before it happens. Now, of course, it's easier if the position's already known and I show it to you and now you know it. But the point is, when that can happen in different positions, not this one, you have to see it then too. You have to feel it. Okay? And of course, bishop e3 is the same thing. queen b4 check wins the bishop. And white usually plays queen e2. Now, queen b4 is illegal because check, and queen b4 doesn't attack the bishop, it's defended. So queen e2 really stops queen b4. Okay, now you may have had chess coaches in the past tell you things like, this pawn is weak, that pawn is isolated, and your bishop isn't as good as your opponent's bishop, and you have a weakness on the queen side. None of that matters. You know when it matters? It matters when Carlsen plays Caruana. Then it matters. You're not Carlsen, and if you are Carlsen, why are you watching my lecture? This is for intermediate players. Oh, you're Henrik Carlsen. Hi, Henrik. Okay, you can watch the lecture. Although Henrik Carlsen's about 2100. So this lecture is too easy for him too. These kinds of tactics that we know from known positions, you have to see them in positions you don't know because it's the same tactic. Okay. And so just from my chess career and looking at other people's games, looking at my games, studying thousands of chess games in my head, I can show you similar traps that happen all the time. Okay, I was watching a game that went like this. And now white made the losing move. And there's not a lot of losing moves. If you were trying to lose on purpose, you could play bishop h6. Otherwise, it's very hard to make the losing move here. I think white made the only other losing move. Why is it a losing move? Because white has to be careful because, as I said 4 times already, when minor pieces are on the 4th and 5th rank and they're not protected, that's risky. White played e3, and if white doesn't play e3 and white doesn't even move, then white's fine. But e3 makes white's position worse. To me, it's the same tactic. It might look different to you. Play queen a5 check, attacking the king and attacking the bishop, and we win the bishop. Bishop is a loose piece. Black played a check. You can't miss checks. In this position, with the pawn on e2, if white plays a silly move and black plays the same trap, that doesn't work. White can play bishop d2 or queen d2. The only reason it works is because white played e3 and the bishop can't go back. White should have been suspicious because c6 is a weird move. And white should have said, why did black play c6? What does that affect? It affects the queen. The queen had 0 squares to go to. Now it has 3 squares to go to, and one of them is check. You can't miss queen a5 check. If you miss queen a5 check, you'll never get to 2200. Because when your opponent has a check, you can't be like, oh, I missed it. You can't do that. To get good at chess, you have to be good at things that you can't do, not necessarily things that are good for you. You have to not do things that are bad for you. Okay? And when black's threatening queen a5 check, then white has to see that. Okay. Let me flip the board. This game was played between 2 international masters. Okay, queen b3. White says, if you take my knight, I don't want to double my pawns. I want to take with the queen. And white says, I'm attacking your pawn on b7. And this is actually going to be something I discuss later in the lecture. When somebody moves their bishop, and usually everybody moves their bishop, go the whole chess game without moving a bishop. Weird. Possible. Then you're undefending your b pawn. And that's the way chess starts. You may not have noticed this, but all of your pawns are defended. That's why chess 960 is weird to me, because that's not always the case. If white could legally take one of black's pawns now, black can recapture. And in particular, the center pawns are defended 4 times. So you don't have to worry about that so much. However, when you move a bishop, which black did, undefending the b pawn. And what 90% of intermediate players do is they say, I developed my bishop, I'm going to mess up my opponent's pawns, I developed a piece, I'm putting pressure on the knight, and they talk about what they're doing. Sometimes when you make a move, there's negative things that happen. Negative is this pawn's not defended. Now, to prove my point, the most famous game ever played, probably, Morphy versus the Count and the Duke, black played bishop g4. And the reason he got a lost position later was in this position, he played the losing move, knight f6. And knight f6 stops mate, so it looks good. Now, white played queen b3, attacking f7 and b7. You know why it attacks b7? Because the bishop on c8 is gone. So, without even thinking as a grandmaster, when I see a bishop move, I see a pawn that's undefended, and can I take advantage of that? Okay, another example is a trap that I've played and I've been successful with a few times. It's in the note boom. In this position, black should play queen b6. Probably black's better. But a lot of people play bishop b4. And that undefends the g pawn, because when you move your bishop, you undefend the g and the b pawn. That's what you do. And white also undefended his b pawn, but black can't access that. Okay, now we take queen f3, threatening the rook. Bishop b7 loses the bishop. Knight c6 loses the knight. But we can play queen d5 because the knight's pinned. I can try to take the queen, but the computer won't let me because it's pinned. Now white plays queen g3, and this is the Morphy game on the other side of the board. Morphy had a queen and bishop lined up this way, threatening this and this. And we're on the other side of the board, threatening this and this. And in this position, white's already winning. Because white has a double attack against the knight and the pawn. I've had this position 3 or 4 times in my life, and I won all the games. Go Ben. And that's because I know other games, so I can play the same kind of tactical traps. I'm sorry, d6. I'm getting old. Okay, I was showing you this. Black played queen c8, defending the b pawn. White played h3. This was the game between 2 IMs, and black made the losing move here. How do you make the losing move on move 4? It's not easy, but it can be done. Black played bishop h5. This position, black has a piece that's on the 4th and 5th rank that's not protected, and white can't do anything about it. And then the bishop is now protected. White played h3, and black did it again. He moved the bishop to the 4th or 5th rank without being protected. Black should play bishop f5, which is protected. or bishop takes knight. If I was black, I'd probably play bishop takes knight, because I did play bishop g4 just to be consistent. Not really consistent to play bishop f5. Not why I played bishop g4. Okay, but that's fine. Bishop h5, and black was an international master, and he blundered his bishop on move 4. White played queen b5 check. It's check, and bishop's not protected. Now, I could spend the whole lecture, and I've done this with other students who are very low rated, setting up positions where somebody checks with the queen and takes a piece that's moving sideways. So we got diagonal and sideways. Bishop's not protected. The king is exposed. White wins a piece. And what happens with a lot of my students, and most people that aren't my students, which is most people, is when their opponent blunders, but it's like early in the game, nothing's happening, it doesn't look very exciting, they just like, okay, knight c3 is a good move. And they miss their chance to win a bishop. And if a top 20 player in the world was white, white would play queen b5 20 games out of 20. If a 1,000 player was white, maybe 10 out of 20, maybe less. White would play queen b5 check. Maybe after watching this lecture and you improve your chess, maybe you'll do it 20 out of 20. When I say that, I don't mean this position, although it would be nice in this position. I mean any position where you have the same tactic. You have to recognize it without knowing you recognize it. So this is actually sort of funny. If two players are playing who are 1400, then typically they play e4 or d4 just like the super GMs. But if one of them is like, I play a3, then you would be like, terrible. What are you doing? And in actuality, that doesn't affect the result of the game. If two players are 1300 and white plays a3 because he feels like it, I'm not betting on black. It's a toss-up. A3 doesn't change the result of the game. So there's different kinds of moves that grandmasters don't make. Typically, grandmasters don't play here, although sometimes they do. But typically, they don't. Okay? Typically, grandmasters don't play c3. Although Magnus did on a mouse slip against Sam Shankland a couple of years ago. I'm serious. He meant to play c4, but he mouse slipped. And he crushed Shankland because it doesn't matter. So some moves that grandmasters wouldn't play, it doesn't matter if you play them. Who cares? On the other hand, if you're hanging your queen, you know, if it's like e4, knight f6, queen h5, and the guy's taking your queen, you can't do that. Some mistakes you can't do. You can't give your queen away. And you can't say, well, I only give my queen away once every 5 games. No, it has to be once every billion games. You can't give your rook away. You can't hang checkmate in 1. You can't walk into an obvious fork and be like, oh yeah, forgot about that. Now, this part of the lecture, I want to talk about things that people think they know, but they got it wrong. Okay, so here's an example of what's called the equalizing fork. This position. Okay, grandmasters don't play bishop c5, but just a bishop c4, bishop c5. Okay, but just to prove me wrong, Mamedyarov did play this about 3 years ago against Wesley So. Nobody plays that. Low-rated players always play bishop c4. That's every game I've ever seen. And now black can play knight takes e4, and the engine says black has completely equalized because black wins the piece back. Black has no problems. Because black can equalize so easily, grandmasters don't play bishop c4. And when Mamedyarov played bishop c4 against Wesley, Mamedyarov lost. I don't know why he played bishop c4. It's known to not be very good. Maybe he had some tricks in mind. Okay. Now, sometimes those tricks don't work. For example, black plays bishop c5. Boring. Now, white says, hey, I know the fork trick. I can play knight takes pawn and d4, just like black could have, but he didn't. No, you can't always do the same tricks over and over and over again, because when the position is slightly different, times it doesn't work. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. This doesn't work because black takes the bishop. Black's up 2 pieces now. But after this, black's up 1 piece. So just because you know something doesn't mean that it works. Now I'm going to show you 2 examples from my chess career. This happened in Belgium. Oh no, this didn't happen in Belgium. This happened in Ohio. I'm confusing 2 games. Okay, so I was playing in Ohio. My opponent played knight a3 to win his pawn back. I played bishop e6. I was in a frisky mood. Bishop e6 isn't my kind of move, but I wanted to get my opponent out of his preparation early by playing sort of an offbeat move. My opponent knew a trick, and he played the trick here, but the trick doesn't work. He took the pawn anyway. My opponent was 1900. He saw bishop takes knight, and he saw queen a4 check wins the bishop. Just like in positions I showed you earlier. The only problem is queen a4 check doesn't work. Usually these kinds of things work, but if they don't work, you're risking losing material. My opponent after the game said he realized after I took it didn't work, but he did it anyway just to see. And I played b5, which he didn't see when he played knight takes c4, and he ended up resigning here. Like one of my easiest wins ever. And you might say, that'll never happen again. Why are you showing us this one-off? These things don't happen. Okay, then later in my chess career, I had the white pieces. I played the Smith-Morra Gambit, and for reasons I don't understand, my opponent was 1500, played a6. I've never seen that in reply to the Smith-Morra. So I figured I'll be a pawn up, played here, attacking my pawn. I defended my pawn, and he played the same blunder my last opponent made. Bishop takes c5. He saw bishop takes c5. He saw queen a5 check, wins back his bishop. I remember the last game, played b4, and he was like, oh. Now, he didn't resign. He played on a long time. But I'm a piece up on move 5. So I won against a player rated at that time about 900 points less than me and down a piece. Okay, so sometimes these tricks don't work. Sometimes they do work. You have to know the tricks, then you have to know when they work and they don't work. These tricks of checking and taking a piece. Okay, now, one thing I told you earlier in the lecture was when you make a move, that affects other pieces. This affects the bishop, the queen, the knight, and opens the diagonal to the king. And the pawn does some of its own stuff, but intermediate players will stare at the pawn and they should be thinking, how does that affect my other pieces? Okay, so there's an unusual line which has a big opening trap. I'll show you. Check, takes, takes, takes. And this position, in my opinion, queen takes d4 is the best move. Some grandmasters play queen takes d4, and some play e5. I've played both. Now, when black plays e5, instead of staring at the center pawns, which is what an intermediate player does, you should say, how does e5 affect these four pieces? The queen can move, bishop can move, knight can move, king can move. Does any of that matter? Typically, the answer would be fries, but in this case, the answer is yes. Okay, so in this position, if white takes the pawn, that loses the game immediately because black opened up the bishop and plays bishop b4 check and wins the game. Queen takes bishop, loses the queen, and bishop d2 hangs mate in 1. So when your opponent makes a move, you have to see how that affects all the pieces. And I'll show you one more, and then we'll get to the games, even though I've taken twice as long as I expected. There's a chess coach, Chicago area, who tells his kids to play here. And if again, these are little kids. And then after knight g5, you take the knight. And a lot of his students forget, and they play here. And he tells his students, if you forget and play here, now I want you to play this because nobody knows it. And then he teaches them this. And I have to say, I don't know it either. I'm not sure what white's supposed to do here. This is very complicated. It's good for white, but okay. Then the chess coach said, if you remember what I told you and play bishop c5, there are kids who play knight g5 and they see queen takes knight. See, I had surgery, so I couldn't draw an arrow. They're not blundering their knight, they're sacrificing their knight. It's very unsound, but it works about 40% of the time. Queen takes knight, d4. And if you're a little kid and you're rated 200, 300, 400, 500, you're staring at the pawn and you're not looking at what d4 unleashed. It unleashes the bishop. So if black takes the pawn, then white takes the queen. And there are kids who intentionally give their knight away and just hope that black doesn't see bishop takes queen. And he tells his kids, if this happens, you take this and you're incredibly winning. Black is like +7 here. Black's winning immediately out of the opening. Anyway, those kinds of traps happen because of those tactics. We'll very quickly look at the games that I prepared. This is a game I played against NN. Played a Sicilian. H4 is a little iffy. And now my opponent made a bad move. Played queen e2. Queen e2 begs black to play a certain move, which I could have played the last couple of moves. I just decided not to. Now I couldn't help myself. Played knight d4. In a few moves, my opponent resigned. And black's not winning here, but I calculated what I thought were the most obvious moves, and in one of the variations, I win. And my opponent went into that, and I'm going to give you this improve your chess advice. Okay, so he played knight d5, I played e6, and he played knight f4. Okay, now, this bishop is protected, so it doesn't fall under the purview of our loose pieces on the 4th and 5th rank. But the knight does, and c pawn's not protected, so I can play queen c7. Attacking the knight, attacking the pawn. This was a slow game, like game in 90 minutes. When I played queen c7 and I went to hit the clock, my opponent was moving. Okay, you can't do that. When you have 90 minutes, you can't move while your opponent's moving. Even if you want to, don't do that. That's not how you play chess. Improve your chess is you think about your moves. My opponent was over 1900. He's been over 2000. And he made a move that loses a lot of material. Now, I think if white plays perfectly, he's still losing a pawn, but my opponent was strong enough to defend both his knight and his pawn. A lot of my students can't figure out in this position how white defends both, so they wouldn't blunder like him. Played d3, queen attacks, defends the pawn, bishop defends the knight. And now this bishop now falls under the purview of our loose pieces. d3 allows a check, queen a5 check. My opponent's too strong to do that. He's rated over 1900, but he played too quickly. I actually saw this position when I played knight d4, and I was like, if white goes here, I'll go here. If white, and then I'm like, d3 defends both. If that loses, he can't do that. He did that before I hit the clock. Okay, terrible blunder, falling into one of our very well-known tricks. He was an adult, and tricks are for kids. Okay, this is a game I won on my birthday. Okay, in this position, in a Slav, black is rated 2150. He made a very bad move. Played bishop f5. Why is this bad? It's bad because of what I told you earlier in the lecture. Rawr. The B pawn is not protected. So I trade on d5, and now my queen is putting pressure on b7 and d5. The engine says black should play bishop c8. Obviously, black doesn't want to play bishop c8. Black played bishop f5. But the engine realizes other moves are worse. My opponent continued playing badly, played b6. When you move your bishop away from the queen side, you can't play b6. Terrible. I had this position several times, but not against grandmasters. They don't play bishop f5. They certainly wouldn't play b6, weakening all the squares around their king and white squares when their white square bishop already left. Bishop g5. I want to take his knight and then take his pawn. He played bishop e6, which was a weird move. e3. Played a6, stopping my bishop and my knight from going to b5. Played rook c1. White has a huge lead in development. Knight bd7. And in this position, I could win a pawn. I like winning pawns. And the way to figure out you win a pawn is to calculate. What's the first move you should calculate? I've been talking about checks for 45 minutes. Now we're going to talk about captures. Checks and captures are the forcing moves that you need to see. So I captured, and I said, well, if he takes with one of the pawns, his D pawn's not defended sufficiently. Yeah, I'm a pawn up. Go Ben. So he took with the knight, and now I played a trick because I've played thousands of games of chess, playing chess my whole life. I've seen hundreds of thousands of chess positions. So I see tactical tricks, and the reason is I recognize things. Here I recognize the king is on this open diagonal waiting for me to check him. And if his pawn wasn't here, then I could check him with my bishop or my queen. So I made sure his pawn wasn't there. I took his pawn. Now if he takes my bishop, queen b5 check, wins his rook. And I thought I win a pawn and I'm better. I didn't realize how much better. The engine says white is plus 4.4. Where'd that come from? White is completely winning because black's king can't escape. Knight e5 is coming, knight b5 is coming, etc. And in this position, my opponent resigned, and I was like, is it my birthday? And it was my birthday. This game was played on my birthday. Okay, I want to recap because I want to talk about what we talked about. Loose pieces on the 4th and 5th rank, you have to watch out for those. You should spend more of your time thinking about your opponent's moves, not your moves. All the best players in the world are objectively calculating what their opponent can do, and you guys are like, I hope my opponent blunders. That's not how you get better at chess. That's how you beat beginners. If you want to beat stronger players, you have to find out what their best moves are and what are you going to do against them. And you have to look at checks and captures every move. You can't take a break. If you have a check or a capture, analyze it, see if it's good. If your opponent has one and it's really good, don't let them do it. That's why the best players in the world take their time, and a lot of beginning players just play too fast. They're not looking for their opponent's best moves, so they don't get better. And then, of course, play in the center, develop your pieces in castle, which is like beginner advice, but it applies to everybody. You want to have active pieces. That's more important than pawn structure. Make sure your pieces can do things and they have squares available so you can improve your pieces every move. Every move you make in chess, you want your position to be better than it was previously. And if you're a super grandmaster, then you can stop your opponent from making their position better, i.e. Anatoly Karpov. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this lecture, Improve Your Chess. Thanks to Marshall Blanchard for sponsoring. If you want to sponsor a lecture, you can look in the details. I can't ever remember the word, no matter how many times I say it. The description, that's the word. Take two. You can look at the description of the video. It'll give you Karen's email address. You can sponsor any lecture of your choice. I wanted to talk about a lot more, but there wasn't enough time. Chess has a lot going on. I got to a few things. If you improve on those areas, which I discussed, you'll be a better chess player. Thanks for watching the lecture. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time with more weekly lectures. Bye, everybody.